Our first scripture this morning is from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female God created them. Psalm 139, 13 through 16. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together stitch by stitch in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed.
Please stand for the reading of the Gospel. Matthew chapter 13, verses 44 through 45. Buried treasure hidden in a field. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Pearl of great price. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. So there are two kinds of transformative process, and Carl Jung would call that individuation. So individuation is the language, the word that he used to talk about the process of becoming truly who you are. And it's a difficult, long, arduous process. And he called that the individuation process. And Carl Jung, those of you who may not know, he was a Swiss psychologist, and he's known as his work is labeled as a Jungian depth psychology because he dives really, really deep. And so there's a Jungian Institute all over the world. In San Francisco, there's a Jungian Institute, in Los Angeles, and all over the world. People who are dedicated in following his method of doing psychology work. So he said there are two kinds of individuation process. He says one kind is the wildflower individuation process, and the second one, he called it the pot roast process. So it's a broad generalization, but some people, for whatever reason, able to follow the wildflower individuation process, and for most of us, including myself, end up doing the pot roast individuation process. So let's show a picture of wild poppy seed, poppy fields. So this is a picture about 4 years ago in California. There was a drenching rainy season, unusually high amount of precipitation. And these wild poppy seeds were in the ground, but was waiting for the right condition and right moment. And so living in California, as you know, we live in a drought country. But when there is a good drenching rain, like the one we had about 4 years ago in Los Angeles County, there was an extravaganza of California wild poppies blooming that drew thousands of cars to the canyons of LA County, wanting to witness the wonders and the marvels of nature. Next one. Yeah, it was covered with puppies. The seed stays in the ground, and when the right condition comes, it shoots forth and becomes fully what it is designed to be. Next. That's just gorgeous. Hill with lavenders and puppies. You can't match the beauty of God's creation. The unfolding of our lives together is as beautiful and unique as these wild puppies and wildflowers. It is something truly magnificent and treasure to behold. Next. Yeah, those are close-ups. Gorgeous. When you see these flowers, even though you have a bad day, just to make sure they get better, doesn't it? And if you are intending to be a bad person, these flowers help you change your mind and choose what is beautiful and good. This is God's gift. Okay, so the next one is the individuation process known as the pot roast. It's much more complicated, complex, and a lot more work goes into it. There's a lot of, some of us have a lot of defenses and barriers that we have in place from opening up to transformative process, which requires honest vulnerability. But we are heavily defended from becoming vulnerably honest because of shame. The shame is the underlying human condition. And the original sin in Genesis is not the eating of the forbidden fruit. Rather, it is hiding in shame from God. And God says, "Where are you, Adam?" So first call was not human calling out to God. It wasn't Adam saying, "God, where are you?" God was always present, walking in the cool of the evening in the garden, and they just communed together. And it was the sin, the fall, that Adam and Eve decided to hide from God in shame. And so that is the original fall and the original sin. So what's the consequence of doing the work of pot roast or wildflower? Well, next picture will tell you. You get to enjoy the fruits of your work. Are we all going to head on to the nearest pot roast restaurants? Okay. Okay, so the question I have for you is this. Why did the man felt dizzy after receiving an award? Why did he get dizzy after receiving an award? Because he got a faint praise. Because he got a faint praise. Okay, this audience is not responsive. Okay, then let me give it another one. What's a well-balanced Irish man? It's a man with chip on both of his shoulders. So our ego is requiring 4 things. You know, I said 3 things in the past, but someone came to me and said, "You know, you forgot one more thing." "What's that?" And told me the 4th thing. And the 4th thing was, who are the people that you hang out with? So ego is inherently bankrupt. It doesn't have innate sense of worth without external markers to define it. So what I mean by that is that there are 4 external markers to gauge your worth. First is what I have. You know, where do I live? What zip code I live? What kind of house? What kind of boat? What kind of car I drive? It's all about, you know, your status is associated with what I own. Number 2, what I do. You know, am I a ditch digger or am I a doctor? You know, what I do defines your status. The 3rd is, as that person brought to my attention, who I hang out with. And so everybody wants to take selfie with celebrities, right? Whether it's a famous actress or singer or a politician or athlete. And then what do? Immediately you broadcast that on Instagram and TikToks and Facebook. Hey, look Look who I hung out with today. Look who am I associating with, right? And you want to take a picture of all the cool people in school and take a picture of that and says, hey, I am with these cool people, and therefore my status is raised. So that's the third thing. And especially young people are very, very vulnerable to that. And then finally, the fourth thing that defines our sense of self-worth is what others think of me. Do they think highly of me or lowly of me? And especially young people who haven't built their sense of ego strength strong enough yet, they get devastated by cyberbullying, Instagrams and whatnot. And if they don't get enough likes, if somebody says something bad about me, I just fold and I'm devastated. My sense of self is down the tube. Why? It's all about perception of others, what they think of me. So all of us, whether you are impressionable youth or child or adult, we are all subjected to these four things that we look for to evaluate our sense of self. So I'm going to be taking this Sunday to lay the groundwork for you to have a full appreciation and impact of gazing at the icon of Christ of Sinai. It's a very, very powerful icon. It is about Christ, seeing the face of Christ face to face, and what that means. And so in order to fully appreciate and be impactful, I am laying the groundwork today for you to be ready to experience that. People who are living through a false self mirage, which we all are to a certain extent, of who they would like to be, have deeply dysfunctional and fragile inner self, and are constantly holding others responsible for their own disordered feelings. That's a mouthful. Let me say that again. People who are living through a false self-mirage of who they would like to be have a deeply dysfunctional and fragile inner self and are constantly holding others responsible for their own disordered feelings. So you behave badly and you abuse your spouse, or you hit your child, or kick your dog, or whatever, and you justify it. You are responsible for my bad feelings, for making me feel bad about myself. And so I'm going to punish you. So why do we do that? Why do we blame others instead of taking responsibility? Why do we do that? Because we don't want to feel the shame. We don't want to own the shame, right? So when we are able to deflect and blame, then I don't have to own the shame. It's you who is responsible for this. This isn't me, it's you. So the first order of the day is learning how to take back the projection and taking ownership of your own mess and your own stuff instead of blaming. So we want to feel known and seen and loved. But can you say, I see you, I love you to yourself? Can you do that? Without self-intimacy, we are unlikely to allow ourselves to be seen fully. Intimacy is to be known. Intimate moment is when you are seen and see the other. Intimacy in relationship happens through mutual self-disclosure. Intimacy is a dance between self-revelation and other revelation, back and forth. So when you have a best friend that you can say anything, isn't that a wonderful conversation? That intimacy to be known opens up the level of intimacy that only God can respond to, that deep longing to be known. We ultimately desire to be deeply known, and at the same time we are terrified of being deeply known. To be loved and known by the other is to see the face of God. To be loved and known by the other is to see the face of God. Mahatma Gandhi said, "My ultimate goal in my life is to see God face to face." Intimacy between two individuals who have chosen to take risk for mutual self-disclosure moves toward mutual becoming. When we were born, all of us, every single human being ever was born, was beheld by the icon, the image of God. The icon is the image of God. We were fully ourselves. There was nothing we needed to do but just be. We were just balls of light emanating and glowing. And we were loved unconditionally. We were accepted as we are unconditionally. However, as life will have you, along the way, that original image got broken from people who reflected back to us. Their mirrors were less than perfect. Thus, ego was born. The ego was born out of that broken mirroring. And the shame became the underlying base of our human condition. Our human behaviors are a dance between hiding and being seen, like hide and seek, hiding in shame and wanting to be found. You know, when you play hide and seek, if you hide too well and nobody finds you, there's a story about a boy who hid himself so well, all the neighborhood kids just gave up and went home. And he got out and said, "Hey, I'm here. Where you all left me?" So you want to hide, and yet if you're not found, you are very disappointed. So here is Irish living poet, by the way, David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E. And he wrote a poem called Vulnerability. Because it takes vulnerability to be seen, to open up. If you are heavily defended, you don't open up. Why? Because I am ashamed. Because if I open up and you see me as who I am, you might judge me negatively, and you might not like me anymore. You might not love me, and ultimately you might leave me and abandon me behind. That's the unconscious terror of fear of vulnerability. The spiritual transformative process that's required is to be vulnerable, open, receptive. So I once was told by a woman who specializes in this work. She said, it takes a powerful person to be vulnerable. It takes a powerful person to be vulnerable. So I'm going to read you a poem by David Whyte. Vulnerability is not a weakness, a passing indisposition, or something we can arrange to do without. Vulnerability is not a choice. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to become something we are not. And most especially to close off our understanding of the grief of others. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to become, I already read that. More seriously, in refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential and conversational foundation of our identity. To have a temporary, isolated sense of power over all events and circumstances is a lovely, illusory privilege, and perhaps the prime and most beautifully constructed conceit of being human, and especially of being youthfully human. But it is a privilege that must be surrendered with that same youth, with ill health, with accident, with the loss of loved ones who do not share our untouchable powers. Powers eventually and most emphatically given up as we approach our last breath. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully. Or conversely, as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful, always at the gates of existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door. vulnerability. I will end here. I learned that if you water too much, the water flows out of pot's base. So I'm going to end it here. So we will resume next Sunday, and we're going to prepare ourselves to receive the gift of the icon of Christ of Sinai. And I hope it will have an impact as it has been in my life.